this video, I'm going to be building an awesome gaming PC build capable of powering this monstrosity. A 4K, high refresh rate, 165Hz gaming monitor that, by the way, is very heavy. To see just how far competitive 4K gaming has come. Are the latest and greatest GPUs actually able to achieve competitive frame rates in the latest titles? We're talking 100, 120, 150 frames per second, or actually do they still fall a little bit flat? In this one, I'm going to find out and walk you guys through the best parts available and hopefully have some fun in the process. Let's do this. The GeekaWhat Amazon storefront is now live for my UK and US viewers. You can learn more about the parts and pricing of everything that makes this build and all the other builds on the channel possible. Browse my favourite monthly tech picks and even learn more about the gear that makes these videos possible. I'm regularly updating it with all my favourite tech finds, and you can find more with the first links in the description below. At the heart of today's build is the RTX 4080, specifically Gigabyte's Eagle model, a design that offers 4080 performance at a lower price than some of the more, let's say, outlandish cooler designs, alongside Intel's 13th gen platform in the form of their i5-13600KF. While this build is by no means cheap, I wanted to really focus in on 4K gaming. Do you have to spend loads and loads of money on an i7, an i9, a 4090 to achieve it? Or actually, are there a few tricks we can get to ensure solid 4K gaming at an expensive but not ludicrous price point? The 4080 delivers pretty strong performance, and of course, in a wide range of titles, you also do find some DLSS 3 support, which will definitely help us to get that 4K gaming performance, but more on that later. With this being an Intel platform build, obviously need an Intel motherboard. The Gigabyte Z790 Aorus Elite AX is a solid choice. It supports DDR5 memory, which, to be honest with you, at this price point is a worthy upgrade and actually isn't that much more expensive than DDR4 nowadays, while also not necessarily breaking the bank. You don't get features like 10 gigabit Ethernet, for example, but you do get solid I/O, decent connectivity, USB-C, PCI Gen 5, so it ticks really a lot of boxes. In terms of the DDR5 memory, I've picked up Thermaltake's ToughRAM. This is their XG kit with 6,000 mega transfers per second and a pretty unique aesthetic. Honestly, I just went for it because it looks cool and provides decent performance. Storage will be provided by WD's Black SN850, a decent Gen 4 NVMe drive with speeds of up to 7,000 megabytes a second. The whole system will be built inside of NZXT's H7 Flow. Of course, for any build using a next-gen GPU, you need plenty of clearance, which this case provides, and also loads of mesh for decent airflow. It's also not the most expensive case ever, and when paired with a few of NZXT's RGB fans, and of course the fans included in the Kraken X73 cooler, a solid design with a 360mm rad for keeping temps nice and low, performance is bound to be pretty decent. As far as power goes as well, I'm going to recommend two options. For those of you looking to keep the cost down a little bit, NZXT's C850 is more than capable, though if you want to maximise overclocking and keep a bit of room for future upgrades, their C1000 is also a decent bet. I've gone for an NZXT and Gigabyte theme in this build so everything ties in a bit more cohesively. Now, of course, the aim of this system is 4K gaming, something that won't be high on everyone's priority list, but is becoming more feasible than ever. So why then did I pick the 4080 over, say, an AMD 7900 XT or XTX? Well, frankly, DLSS 3 was, for me, the deciding factor. While not supported in all games at the moment, though support is growing, it does allow for better resolution scaling than AMD's Fidelity FX in its current state. That means in titles like Cyberpunk 2077, F1 22, Hogwarts Legacy, and a couple of the latest Spider-Man titles, you'll be eligible to see those nice juicy frame rate increases, but more on those later on. You will see pretty strong performance uplifts, something that we discovered in our testing comparing DLSS 3 against equivalent AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution. I also think this is a more compelling option than the 4070 Ti, as long as the there's not much in it price-wise, as getting a cheaper cooler here means you're actually not spending all that much more money. And of course, you're not so limited on the video memory front. But what do you get then for your money when you go for a cheaper cooler design? Of course, I handled the Aorus designs. The Aorus card, by the way, is absolutely huge. So I'm intrigued as to how much smaller this card is. Although it looks, from my first impressions, not that much smaller. Okay. I mean, the form factor is definitely a bit slimmer. It's not as tall from top to bottom, looking at it this way, but it's by no means a small or a measly graphics card. I think this is definitely going to give us ample cooling still for what we're trying to achieve. So Gigabyte, fair play. Still pretty big though, and you can see now why I've gone for that large case, as we're definitely going to need it. That's enough though about all the parts that make this thing possible. It's time to actually bleed and put it together. Let's take a look at this motherboard, shall we? Now, we have reviewed this in full and thought it was pretty decent, hence we're featuring it today. With Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 6E, you've also got plenty of USB 3.2 Gen 2 ports. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus your 20 gigabit USB-C. Some USB 2s, which is also nice to see. Decent VRM cooling. Massive heatsink for your M.2. And of course, the white PCI slot at the top is the Gen 5 option. Nice. Next gen cards don't even need Gen 5, so super overkill and future-proofed in that regard. And it's actually surprisingly cost-effective as far as the motherboard goes. The aesthetic is, in exchange, a little more bland, but I can live with that. Processor is next up, and I'm just gonna pop into place the i5-13600K, 14 cores and 20 threads. Of course, the 14 cores aren't all the more powerful performance cores, but that doesn't matter. It's the best gaming CPU right now that you can get for under $300. And unfortunately, I say unfortunately because it's nice to have competition. It doesn't look like the 7600X3D or whatever it's going to be called is going to rival this chip. So for now, 13600K or KF. Only difference is one doesn't have graphics and can save you a little bit more money. RAM-wise, we've got a Thermaltake kit. I love the design of this kit, and you'll see why in a moment. Take a look at this. Thermaltake, you absolute beauty. And we're just going to slide those into the RAM slots over here. So slots 2 and slots 4, as you would expect from a build like this one. Really, really love the aesthetic of this RAM. I've been doing so many white builds recently, and I feel like I've missed my darker color scheme systems. Finally, SSD is last up, the SN850. You'll see it's a tiny, tiny little thing just here, and we're going to pop that underneath the top M.2 heatsink. You will need a smaller screwdriver for this, often referred to on the channel as a teeny, tiny screwdriver, and that will, of course, fasten everything into place. This heatsink is like mega overkill, but I mean, not gonna complain. It looks kind of cool, pretty snazzy, I approve. The last thing I'm gonna do to the motherboard before looking at the case is just add this backplate and a few screws in for the cooler. So if I flip this around, you'll be able to see this just slots into place through each of these holes. Each of the corner pieces is adjustable, so that means they can go in nice and easily. Yes, come on, in you pop. Before popping in these male-to-male posts in each corner. So of course, we're gonna go into all 4 posts like so. Tighten them up nicely, and we'll be using these in just a moment for the installation of the radiator and water block. First though, it's time to actually move the motherboard into the case, and NZXT make this super easy. Watch, I haven't even prepped off camera. Oh, it's toolless. And it's beautiful, and it's so user-friendly. NZXT. Nice. And we're going to repeat for the top panel too. I made a sound effect as though that was heavy, and it was certainly not particularly heavy. Then, nice and easily, just slide the motherboard in. Isn't this one of the easiest things you've ever seen? I shouldn't say that really, because people watch these videos to feel like I know what I'm doing. And I do know what I'm doing. It's just not actually particularly difficult to build a PC, which is why you should build one too. I'll leave all the parts mentioned today linked at the affiliate links down below. Good progress is being made then. Cooler is next. I think I'm going to pop the radiator at the front of the case with the fans in front of that. One thing I like about this chassis, let me show you. Whoa! Let me show you all without breaking the system. Yes. Lovely, is how much clearance is actually in this front portion. So you can put the radiator just here where my hand is and the fans in front. You can't put the radiator this side because there's no way you can run the tubes through, but we can put it here, fans in front, and then of course the water block will fasten on in a minute, and I'll show you guys how to do that. For now though, get all those radiators and the fans on to keep the whole cooler mounted and stop it from moving anywhere. For the water block, I simply need to drop on just a dab of thermal paste, about the size of a large grain of rice. That's a bit of a mess, this one, but that's okay. I say a bit, I think the thermal paste is gone off. That's not good. Right, in the bin it goes. Got there in the end, and then of course the water block just sits directly on top. I think I'm gonna pop it in this sort of orientation. Of course, the NZXT logo will also spin so that it becomes upright, with the included thumb screws then being used to fasten the whole thing into place. Let me show you how that works. There we go, there's one. Let's also aim and put another one on as well while we're here. Oh! Well, the thermal paste was spreading, we know that much for sure. What's happened here essentially is that NZXT used this system where you can interchange the mounting on the cooler itself, but sometimes it doesn't always play ball. So let's try that again. Clip her in properly, make sure that it's not actually gonna come out this time. Then add the water block sort of back into place before finally screwing the whole thing down. My goodness, what a palaver. 2 more screws to go, and then you can tighten them up with a screwdriver just to make sure that the water block isn't gonna go anywhere. Oh, satisfying. GPU is going to be the next thing I'm going to install. Power supply and final fans will be afterwards. Now, as I say, talked about this earlier, we'll look at this in detail in the benchmark section in a few moments, so hold tight for that. But I like this thing. Honestly, I think it looks really, really good. In terms of figuring out which PCIe slots need removing, it's really easy. Hover the graphics card over the slot you're going to install it into, and then you're able to far easier tell which bits need actually removing. So in this case, it's the second slot, which removes with the second screw, like so, and then also the third slot, which removes with the third screw. Yeah, easy peasy. Keep hold of these screws as you want to use these to actually secure the card in, remove the PCI lanes, keep hold of those two just in case for future use. Then it's a simple case of sliding the card in, bit of pressure, boom. Oh, look at that. I like that. Yeah. And obviously secure the card in with the screws we just took out, and then I'll be back with you. I'm also going to add into place this extra NZXT RGB fan I picked up for the rear, just a 120mm unit, so that's going to go in the back there and ensure everything looks and performs nicely. Before wrapping up the actual physical build portion of the video with the power supply, I've opted for the 1000 watt unit. As I say, not strictly necessary, as the 850 will save you some money and perform a very, very similar duty. So let's go ahead and pop this thing in, shall we? I'm also just going to pop in a couple of power supply cable extensions. These ones are easy DIY fab, they're fantastic, and I'll link them down below. There's loads and loads of different color options available, and they're all really, really cool. So definitely be sure to go and check those out. So the build portion of the video is pretty much there, but how exactly does this thing perform? Well, that's the important question that we're going to answer in just a minute using, where is it? The Gigabyte M32U, a 4K gaming monitor that is the perfect match for a system like this. But before any of that, it's time for a montage, isn't it? To see how this thing looks when it's all powered up, and I'll rejoin you in just a moment. Taking a look at performance then, and I'm glad to say that it's a pretty impressive spread across the board. As I mentioned earlier, the idea today was to test across the board at 4K, using of course DLSS 3. Not all games support it, so some of our titles will and some won't include it, and I'll point those out as we go. First of all, let's look at COD Modern Warfare 2 Remastered. At 4K high with DLSS set to performance mode, DLSS 2.0 in this instance, the machine pulled in an impressive 144 FPS. This is just about where I would expect for a competitive gaming experience, and is of course the frame rate that a lot of higher refresh rate monitors, including the M32U, look to aim towards. This is going to provide a really competitive experience with the higher number of frames, of course allowing you to be that bit better in fast-paced titles. The only game we didn't test today at 4K was Fortnite, 1080p competitive settings in this instance, and the build achieved 314 FPS. I did this primarily to check against a CPU bottleneck before proceeding, and was glad to see that the 13600KF held up well. The likes of Apex Legends, those other Battle Royale FPS titles did well too. 4K high yielded 153 FPS, so competitive we actually managed to win when testing Apex on this system in this particular game. Formula 1 2022 is the first of our DLSS compatible titles, and here we did a little bit of testing to see just how the machine would stack up. 4K ultra high with ray tracing enabled and DLSS 2.0 turned on, and the machine delivered 140 FPS on average. Turn on DLSS 3.0 though, however, and the frame rate skyrockets to 175. That's given us a good chunk more frame rate without having to do any extra work, and demonstrates the power of this frame generation technology. And this was once again prevalent in Spider-Man's Miles Morales 4K high settings with DLSS enabled, ray tracing on, and DLSS 2 turned on too, and we got 69 FPS. Good, but not quite as competitive as we'd like for a high refresh rate monitor. Thankfully, turning on DLSS 3 did fix that, as expected, moving the frame rate up by 32 FPS, delivering nearly a 50% increase over DLSS 2, which in of itself will have delivered a 30 or 40% gain over having no DLSS enabled. These results once again continued through into the likes of Cyberpunk 2077, another DLSS 3 title, where at 4K high with RTX set to Ultra and DLSS 2.0 enabled, the machine pulled in 68 FPS. Good, but not great for competitive gaming, fixed once again by DLSS 3 at 4K high with RTX on Ultra, and of course DLSS 3 enabled, which brought with it 95 FPS on average. You can see here how DLSS 2 and 3 both provide a nice performance jump, but especially that newer technology, and why I picked the RTX 4080 for this not budget oriented, but 4K build that looks to extrapolate the most competitive frame rate without having to spend thousands and thousands of pounds, or of course dollars. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to get subscribed. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.